I spent years being invisible, overlooked, ignored. I was the girl no one believed in, the one everyone thought would fail. And now, those same people call me successful and act like they always supported me. Funny how that works, right? Growing up, I wasn't the golden child, the smart one, or the talented one. I was just there. My older sister, Emily, was the pride of the family, the straight-A student, the debate champion, the one with a clear path to success. My parents, Lisa and Tom, couldn't stop bragging about her. Emily's so brilliant, they'd say. She's going to do great things. And me? I was just fine, not failing, not excelling, just existing in the background. I remember sitting at the dinner table while my parents praised Emily's latest achievement. Another award, another milestone. They talked about her future like it was set in stone, like greatness was inevitable for her. Then they'd glance at me, offer a half-hearted smile, and move on. And Grace? She's doing fine. That was my identity. The one who was fine. Never enough to be praised, never enough to be noticed. At school, it was the same. Teachers barely remembered my name, never picked me for anything important. I wasn't the class clown, the overachiever, or the troublemaker. I was just another face in the crowd. Even among friends, I felt like an afterthought, like I was always in the background of someone else's story. No one expected much from me, so I stopped expecting much from myself. By the time high school ended, I had no real direction. College wasn't discussed in my house the way it was for Emily. For her, my parents had spent years planning, saving, preparing. But when I brought it up, they dismissed it like it was a passing thought. We can't afford to waste money on something that might not work out, Grace. As if investing in my future was a gamble, while Emily's was a certainty. I watched as my classmates packed up for college, moving into dorms, starting their lives. Meanwhile, I was stuck at home, working minimum wage jobs, watching the world move forward without me. I was 19 and already felt like I had been left behind. I tried not to be bitter. I told myself that maybe this was just how things were meant to be. But then came the moment that changed everything. It was a holiday dinner, and as usual, the conversation revolved around Emily. She had just been accepted in a law school, and my parents couldn't have been prouder. We always knew she'd do it. My mom gushed, her face glowing with pride. And me? No one even asked how I was doing. No one noticed the way I clenched my fists under the table, the way I swallowed down the lump in my throat. It was as if I didn't exist. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I had let pass me by. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. No one was coming to save me. No one was going to push me towards something greater. No one believed in me enough to even ask what I wanted from life. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. If I was ever going to be more than just an afterthought, I had to be the one to make it happen. I wasn't sure how. I had no plan, no roadmap, no guidance. But I knew one thing for certain. I was done being invisible. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sound of my parents' voices downstairs. They were still talking about Emily, about how proud they were, about how she was going to make something of herself. Not once did they mention me. It shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still stung. I clenched my fists under the blankets, feeling a slow burn of anger mixed with the dull ache of disappointment. That was the moment I realized that if I wanted a future, I had to build it myself. No one was going to hand me a roadmap. No one was going to cheer me on. I had spent my whole life waiting to be seen, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting for someone to tell me that I was worth something. And I was done waiting. The next morning, I woke up with a new kind of determination. It wasn't fiery or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, an ember instead of a flame. I didn't have grand plans or a clear direction, but I knew one thing. I had to start somewhere. I took every shift I could at the diner. Morning shifts, double shifts, overnight shifts, I didn't care. I worked until my feet ached, until my hands were raw from scrubbing plates, until the only thing I could do at the end of the day was collapse into bed. The paycheck was pitiful, barely enough to cover gas and groceries, but I saved every penny I could. Meanwhile, my parents barely noticed. Or maybe they didn't care. My dad still asked me to run errands for him. My mom still expected me to help set the table for dinner every night. as if I wasn't already exhausted from working 12-hour days. I never complained. What was the point? But the hardest part wasn't the work. It was the loneliness. All my friends had left for college. My phone barely buzzed anymore. Social media was unbearable. Every post was a reminder of what I was missing out on. Dorm parties, study sessions, new friendships. They were all moving forward while I was stuck in place, grinding away at a dead-end job. The worst was when they'd come back for the holidays. They'd sit around the coffee shop talking about their professors, their internships, their plans for the future. And I had nothing to add. "I bet you're loving the break," one of them said to me once, stirring her latte. I forced a smile. "Yeah, it's nice. Nice." What else could I say? That I wasn't on a break because I had nothing to take a break from? That my life had become a cycle of exhaustion and invisibility? That I was terrified I'd be stuck like this forever? So I nodded, sipped my coffee, and laughed at their stories like I wasn't dying inside. But I wasn't just surviving, I was planning. Late at night, after work, when the house was quiet, I'd sit on my bed with my laptop and research. Scholarships, online courses, community college programs, anything that could help me get ahead. One night, I found an online business course. It wasn't free, but it was affordable. It promised to teach marketing strategies, digital branding, how to build a business from scratch. I hesitated before clicking enroll. Was this a waste of money? Would I even be good at it? Then I heard my mom's voice, echoing in my head. "We can't afford to waste money on something that might not work out, Grace." I clicked the button. The first few months were brutal. Between work and classes, I barely slept. I studied in the early mornings before shifts, during my lunch breaks, late at night when everyone else was asleep. I took notes on my phone while waiting tables, listened to lectures through earbuds while mopping floors. No one knew. My parents never asked what I was doing on my laptop at night. My friends were too wrapped up in their own lives to notice. But I kept going, and then something shifted. I got my first freelance gig. A small business needed help with their social media. It wasn't much, just a few posts, a little branding advice, but they paid me. Not much, but enough to make me realize I could do this. So I kept at it. More clients trickled in. I built a website, refined my skills, started networking. Slowly, the work grew. It wasn't just a side gig anymore. It was something real. Then, one evening, I came home from work to find my parents in the living room, beaming with pride. Emily had just secured a prestigious internship at a top law firm. "This is huge for her," my dad said, shaking his head in awe. "She's going places." My mom nodded. We always knew she'd be successful. I stood there gripping the strap of my bag, waiting for them to ask about me, about what I'd been doing, what I was working toward. They didn't. I swallowed hard, nodded, and went upstairs. That night, I stared at my bank account, at the growing number next to my savings balance. For the first time, it felt real. I wasn't just dreaming anymore. I was building something, and they still didn't see it. But it didn't matter, because I did. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to myself. And that was enough. For now. For years, I had been grinding in silence, pushing through exhaustion, doubt, and loneliness. I had built my business from the ground up, taking on any client that would give me a chance. I wasn't making millions, but I was making enough. Enough to know I had built something real. Enough to know I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. But no one in my family saw it. To them, I was still the girl who never quite figured things out. The one who hadn't taken the right path. Emily was in her final year of law school, already receiving offers from prestigious firms. My parents couldn't stop talking about it. One evening, I came home to find them sitting at the kitchen table, deep in conversation. "She's going to be working with some of the top legal minds in the country," my dad was saying. My mom nodded, beaming. "We always knew she'd make it. All those years of hard work. It's finally paying off." They hadn't noticed me standing in the doorway. I could have walked in and sat down, but I didn't. I knew exactly how this conversation would go. They would continue talking about Emily, and I would sit there, silent, waiting for someone to ask about me. But they never would. So I turned and went upstairs. That night, I sat in my room, staring at my laptop. An unread email notification sat in my inbox. A potential new client. A big one. A name I had only dreamed of working with. If I could land this contract, it would change everything. It was the kind of client that could put my name on the map. I hesitated before opening it. Even after everything, doubt still crept in. Was I good enough? Did I really deserve this? Then I remembered every late night, every rejection, every time I had felt like I wasn't enough. I clicked the email and started typing my response. 2 weeks later, I sat in my first ever corporate boardroom. Across from me sat the CEO of the client I was hoping to land, a well-known national brand looking for a complete digital overhaul. I had spent every waking moment preparing for this pitch. I had studied their company, their competitors, their past strategies. I knew their weak spots, their potential for growth, and exactly how I could help them. But as I sat there, waiting for my turn to speak, I felt that familiar fear creep in. What if I wasn't good enough? What if they saw right through me? What if I wasn't meant to be here? Then I thought of my parents. I thought of all the times they had dismissed me, all the times they had made me feel like I wasn't capable of something bigger. And I let that fire fuel me. I took a breath, straightened my posture, and started speaking. I laid out my strategy with confidence, my voice steady, my vision clear. I didn't just tell them what I could do. I showed them why they needed me. When I finished, there was a long silence. The CEO leaned back in his chair, considering my proposal. I felt my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then he smiled. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," he said. "We'd love to have you on board." I nodded, keeping my expression calm. But inside, something shattered. Every ounce of doubt, every moment of insecurity. I had done it. When I got home that night, my parents were in the living room, watching TV. I stood in the doorway for a moment, debating whether to say anything. Then I took a deep breath. "I landed a major client today," I said, my voice even. They both looked up surprised. "Oh," my dad said. "What kind of client?" I met his gaze. "A national brand. A 6-figure contract." My mom blinked. That's wonderful, Grace." But I could see the confusion in her eyes, the way she struggled to process it. This wasn't what they had expected. In their minds, success looked like degrees, promotions, climbing the corporate ladder. They had never understood my path, and now, even faced with undeniable proof, they didn't know what to do with it. For the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't looking for their validation anymore, because I knew the truth. I had built this on my own, without their help, without their belief. And suddenly, the same people who had doubted me, they were the first to congratulate me. The night after I landed my biggest client, I sat alone in my room, staring at my phone. The screen glowed with a flurry of messages. Congratulations from colleagues, old clients, even a few former classmates who had somehow caught wind of my success. But not a single message from my parents. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even hurt. Not anymore. The next morning, I walked downstairs to the kitchen where my mom was pouring coffee and my dad was reading the newspaper. Emily's name was already on my mom's lips before she even looked up. She just got an offer from a firm in New York, she said, beaming. She might be moving soon. I nodded, reaching for a glass. I had no bitterness toward my sister. She had always played the role they had carved out for her, just as I had played mine. The difference was I had finally rewritten my part. I cleared my throat. "I got a new client," I said, my voice even. "A big one." Mom turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Oh." "A 6-figure contract. With a national brand." There was a pause. Then she smiled, but it was the polite, restrained kind of smile someone gives when they don't quite know what to say. "We always knew you had it in you," she said, nodding as if she had seen this coming all along. I almost laughed. No, they hadn't. They had never believed in me. They had never expected anything from me. But now that I had done what they never thought I could, they wanted to act like they had always known. Dad folded his newspaper and looked at me thoughtfully. "So this business of yours, it's actually doing well?" I met his gaze. "It's not just doing well, Dad. It's successful." Emily, who had just walked in, leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. "You really surprised us, Grace." And there it was. Not "we're so proud of you." Not "we should have believed in you all along." Just "you surprised us." For a long time, I had craved these moments. Their recognition, their approval, some kind of proof that I had finally earned my place at the table. But standing there looking at them, I realized something. I didn't need it. I never had. I had spent years breaking myself to fit into their mold, trying to be someone they could be proud of. And when they refused to see me, I had let that define me. But they weren't the ones who had built my success. I had, without their help, without their encouragement, without their belief. I set my glass down and met their eyes one by one. You didn't know I had it in me, I said softly. You never believed in me. And that's okay, because I believed in myself. For the first time, they had no response. I smiled, but it wasn't for them. It was for me. I turned and left the kitchen, feeling lighter than I had in years, because they had treated me like I was invisible. But I was never invisible. I was just underestimated. And now, they could call me successful all they wanted, but I defined my own worth. I walked out of that kitchen with my head high, not because I had finally earned their approval, but because I no longer needed it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing validation. I wasn't waiting for someone else to tell me I was good enough, because I already knew. And that's what I want you to take from this. I know what it feels like to be underestimated, to have people look at you and decide, without even knowing your potential, that you won't amount to anything. I know what it's like to sit in the background, watching as others get opportunities while you're left feeling invisible. I know the pain of waiting for someone to believe in you, to push you, to tell you that you're worth something, only to realize that no one is coming to do that for you. But here's the truth. You don't need their belief. You don't need their validation. You don't need permission to be great. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Your worth isn't defined by what others see in you. It's defined by what you see in yourself. So ask yourself, who are you waiting for? Whose approval do you think you need? Because I promise you, the moment you stop waiting for someone to give you permission, the moment you decide that you are enough, that is the moment your life will change. I was underestimated my whole life. They thought I would fail. They thought I would stay small, stay invisible. But I didn't, and neither will you. So tell me, have you ever been underestimated? How did you prove them wrong? Share your story. Let's start a conversation, because I know there are so many of us out there who have fought to be seen, who have worked in silence, who have built ourselves from nothing. Let this be the moment you claim your own worth, because never let someone else decide your worth. You are capable of more than they ever imagined. And now, it's time to show them.